Our Torah portion this week contains a very disturbing story. On the eve of their ordination as priests, two of Aaron's sons sneak into the tabernacle to offer an unsolicited sacrifice of burnt incense. The Torah says that they offered an alien fire, and God was incensed, pardon the sacrifice pun, and sent a fire of God's own that consumed the two young men. It is not clear what exactly made the fire alien, or why God was so angry, or if the punishment was justified. The whole story is quite confounding and opaque. It's a mystery. And all that is clear is that the day which was supposed to be the happiest of Aaron's life and of the community's was transformed into tragedy. I won't spend too long on this story because Josh and Kaio are both going to share fascinating interpretations of it tomorrow morning. I mention it tonight by way of introduction to the Haftarah, the additional reading from the book of Samuel, which is paired with Parashat Sh'mini. In both, there are stories with elements of sudden tragic death at a moment that was supposed to be the height of joy. Once again, in the Haftarah, laughter turns to sorrow, and both stories share an inexplicable element, an unexplained death, an unsolvable mystery at the heart of the story that would confound even Holmes or Perrault or Clouseau. In fact, I was recently watching the movie Wake Up Dead Man, the Knives Out mystery, starring Daniel Craig as the delightful and eccentric Benoit Blanc, a modern-day Sherlock Holmes, except he's from Louisiana instead of London. And as I read this week's Haftarah with its mysterious death, I wondered if the inimitable Inspector Blanc could solve such a confounding case once and for all. And so tonight I've imagined how he might tell the strange tale from 2 Samuel chapter 6. Out of respect for those who are actually from New Orleans, I shall try and resist the urge to do the voice, but I make no promises. The year was sometime in the early part of the 10th century BCE. King David had just successfully completed his war with the Philistines. For the first time, the 12 tribes of Israel had been united under one banner, and Jerusalem had been declared the capital of this new nation. Now, the king needed a symbol to solidify this fledgling unity, and so he decided it was time to bring to the blossoming capital the Ark of the Covenant, which contains, as has been demonstrated in various films and depictions, tablets of the Ten Commandments of the law. Now, the Ark had been residing as it were, in the house of a man by the name of Abinadab. So David went to this same Abinadab with a contingent of 30,000 or so men, and they began to march the ark towards Jerusalem in joyful and jubilant parade. And the sons of Abinadab, Uzza and Achio, escorted the ark, driving the cart on which it was being conveyed. At one point, as they passed the property of a man called Nachon, the wheels of the aforementioned cart hit a furrow, and the ark lurched forward portentously as if it might fall to the very ground, and poor Uzza reached out his hand to steady the ark. Now it was well known that no man was to touch the sacred ark, and in that moment there was a blinding flash of light, and when everyone's eyes came back into focus, Uzza lay dead next to the cart. And this, dear congregation, is the mystery of the death of Uzza. Not so much a whodunit, as I think we have a pretty good idea of the culprit, but a why-done-it. Why did God decree that Uzza had to die? Now, with every mystery, there is a red herring, a suspect so obvious that it is best to dismiss him almost right away. And in this case, the suspect, who I think has been most often and most wrongly accused in the history of this case, is Uzza himself. Now, one might be tempted to argue that Uzza should have known better than to touch the ark, but I think the facts of the case prove this argument false. Uzza had grown up with the ark in his house. Caring for it was a part of his familial duty. Could God really not see that he acted not out of disregard, but out of honor? That he acted to protect the ark? And what's more, it was an act of instinct, not of intention. Could he really be culpable for a good and pure action that took place in the instant before conscious thought? No, I believe we can cross poor Uzza off the list as the one responsible for his own untimely demise. Now, as with all mysteries, it is best to look at the events immediately preceding and subsequent to the crime. In the moments before the cart took its terrifying tumble, the scene, as I said, had been quite jubilant. The assembled participants played all kinds of instruments, harps and lyres, tambourines and rattles and cymbals. When Uzza's life ended, so did the fanfare, and the joyful parade instantly became a funeral procession. But more than that, David was now trembling and terrified of the danger of having this ark too near to him or his newly founded city. The risk was too great. So the path was diverted, and the ark was sent not to David's city, but to Obed-Edom, the Gittite, in whose house it resided for 3 whole months. David returned to Jerusalem, thinking that he had avoided tragedy, or at least more tragedy. But soon reports started rolling in about all the blessings that had befallen Obed-Edom since the ark entered his domicile. Now the monarch was really confounded. Was the ark a liability or a gift? Was it dangerous as an omen or protective as an amulet? And so, after careful consideration, the king went up to Obed-Edom to retrieve the ark and bring it finally to Jerusalem. This time he went by himself, without his contingent of 30,000 musicians. But this did not stop him from dancing. He skipped and he spun. He leapt and pirouetted to a melody in his head. And every few feet he paused to make an offering of thanksgiving. When David reached Jerusalem, his wife Michal was on the balcony waiting to greet him. And when she saw him from a distance, she witnessed this flamboyant show, the whirling and twirling silent solo dance that consumed the king with joy and exaltation. And she was ashamed. When he finally made it home, Michal chastised her husband. "How can you act in such an unbecoming way?" she asks. "You bring shame to the throne. You are a laughing stock even to the slave girls in the street." But David, though he was exhausted from the exertion along the road, stood firm. "God has chosen me, and God has chosen this house and this city. How shall I not dance? And through me, everyone shall learn that we honor God with our dance, even the slave girls in the street." I assume the quarrel continued through the night behind closed doors. Words were exchanged that could not be taken back. And I am sad to say things were never the same between David and Michal after that. They were never intimate again. But David had a bigger issue on his mind that weighed heavier than even the crown. He told Nathan, his advisor and prophet, "How is it that I live in this beautiful cedar palace while the ark sits outside in a tent? We should build a beautiful temple which can be the ark's fitting abode." But Nathan consulted God and returned with disappointing news. The ark had always resided in a tent. Why now should it need anything different? In all its wanderings, God had never complained that the ark's accoutrements were insufficient. "And besides, my liege, you are a man of war. And though you've hung up your sling and your bow for your harp and your crown once again, you have seen too much violence to now be the builder of temples. Perhaps your son, who can grow up with enough peace and space to envision a temple, will be worthy of building one for the ark." And with that final disappointing note, my friends, the story abruptly ends, and we are left befuddled and bereft. What are we to make of such a strange story with so many turns and tribulations? The joy of the victory over the Philistines, the terror of the inexplicable death of Uzza, the abundance of the blessings for Obed-Edom, the dancing of David, the rebuke of Michal, the rupture between lovers, the dream of a temple, the denial of a prophet, the disappointment of a king. When we tell this story, the mystery is so much greater, so much more complex with the context. If we are certain that Uzza did not die for any sin or personal failing, then what sense might we make of his untimely demise? What is the meaning of this meandering and messy story, I ask you? And here I think that even the superior intellect of that great Benoit Blanc might come against an impossible problem. Our intrepid investigator might throw up his hands in frustration with no solution to this enthralling enigma. Because here's the truth. So much suffering is senseless. Some people die with dignity and others in degradation. Sometimes the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer. And yet somehow that's not the whole story. Beyond death, there is still dancing and thanksgiving. And beyond the dancing, there's disagreement between loved ones. And beyond the dissolution of a marriage, there's a vision for a brighter tomorrow, even as there's an acknowledgement that it's a tomorrow that generation might not see. It is true that David, in his Psalms, wrote, Haftarah mispedi lemecholi, you turn my mourning into dancing. And it is also true that in the book of Lamentations, we read, Nefched le'evel mecholanu, our dancing is turned into mourning. And so the cycle continues. Dancing to mourning, to leaping, to crying, to jubilation, to desolation, to dreams achieved and dreams deferred and dreams denied completely. The author Saul Bellow once described Jewish literature as the inexplicable commingling of laughter and trembling. And nowhere is this more apparent than in this week's Haftarah, the tale of laughter and leaping, trembling and weeping. The poet Yehuda Amichai corrected Ecclesiastes. A person doesn't have time in his life for everything. A person needs to love and to hate at the same moment, to laugh and to cry with the same eyes, to make love in war and war in love, and to hate and forgive and remember and forget all at once. This is the Jewish way, not to solve the mystery of why tragedy happens or force the hard clay of misfortune into the rough shape of meaning. Rather, it is our goal to find ways to dance in spite of it all. Centuries ago, in the synagogue of Krakow, Poland, the joyous dancing of Simchat Torah was interrupted by a violent pogrom. And for generations after, the survivors of Poland would pause their yearly Simchat Torah celebrations to sit on the floor and chant lamentations. But then they would rise and resume their dancing. What is more miraculous? Their survival, their commemoration, or the fact that they found a way to stand up and dance again? But this is the Jewish instinct. It's the same instinct that after another Simchat Torah pogrom, the horrors of October 7th, a mantra in Israel led by the survivors of the Nova festival was, Od nirkod shuv, we will dance again. Maybe not right now, but someday, and God willing soon, and best, if possible, that we not dance alone. This is the solution that might evade even Blanc or Holmes, but does not elude the Jews. When tragedy strikes, even if we pause, we do not remove our dancing shoes. Shabbat shalom.